Welcome back to Exploring Early American History at St. Paul's, a 13-point self-guided tour of the Village Green and Historic Cemetery at St. Paul's Church National Historic Site in Mount Vernon, New York. This is part 2 of the audio-visual program, serving as a guide for points 8 through 13. The points are marked by small American flags, and the map provided here should help locate the stops on the self-guided tour. For the visitors, we would expect you to pause the program for a closer look at any juncture. Part 1 is also available on this channel. Point 8 is a small flag behind the Fowler family vault. The modest granite gravestone of Jeremiah Fowler is among the oldest legible markers at St. Paul's. Town population was perhaps 350 when he passed away in 1724, including children and many people of limited literacy. For those who might visit the cemetery, when there were a small number of extended families and almost everybody knew each other, initials were sufficient to identify the deceased. Hence, J.F. Jeremiah Fowler was enough. He died, D, on November the 14th day, 1724, with an emphasis on the date of death because that was the only record at the time of no death certificates. While the stone appears simple and nondescript, Fowler was actually one of the town's wealthier citizens. Many people of less wealth were buried with no headstone. Since people were generally buried near a church, the placement of his grave also recalls the location of the town's earlier wooden church, which was situated towards the street from where you are standing. It was destroyed for fuel during the Revolutionary War. Walk directly across to the west for point number 9. Thomas Pinckney is buried here, 1732, with a small limestone marker created by an itinerant colonial carver named Barker. Difficult to read except in the winter late afternoon when the sun is directly upon the stone, it has a rectangular border around the inscription and a small star at the top, typical of Barker's work. Thomas was the son of Philip Pinckney, one of the founders of the town, who drew up the 26-point Eastchester Covenant in 1665, one of the oldest surviving Community Foundation documents. These covenants, agreed upon by all town residents, developed religious and civil laws for Puritan communities. It required residents to maintain a life of religious love, civic virtue, public honesty, and a good fence about all ye arable land, among other things. Thomas would have worshipped in the earlier wooden meeting house, located about 30 yards north of his grave. To reach point number 10, walk perhaps 20 yards, straight line, toward the back of the cemetery, again locating a small American flag. Will Pinckney, who died in 1755. He was about 75 upon death, when there were no birth certificates to determine exact age. Pinckney was a captain of the Eastchester Militia. The town militia was a necessary force in isolated colonial communities, far from British support. It drilled monthly on the green, and all able-bodied men aged 16 to 60 were expected to participate. Additionally, militia fought alongside the English in some of the colonial wars. But the militia was also a social and political institution. Commissioned as an officer in the militia in Eastchester and other colonial towns was a traditional form of service and development of leadership among young men from notable families. Monthly militia drills were festive gatherings of people on the village green in front of St. Paul's Church. Pinckney's sandstone marker, though somewhat damaged, reveals two of the earlier symbols of iconography. The heart, a symbol of religious love, and the star looks like a modern asterisk, a symbol of heaven. Now you will be walking towards the back of the cemetery across a narrow path, through the fenced plots, and into an open area to the flag for point number 11, a sandstone marker with a tripartite top. New York had a greater population of enslaved people than any other northern colony, reflecting the widespread racial prejudice of the day. New York's merchants were heavily involved in the African slave trade, and the colony's restrictive land policies discouraged settlement by free laborers. The enslaved were used as domestic servants, farm hands, and as apprentices to master craftsmen. Until the early 19th century, enslaved Africans represented about 15% of Eastchester's population, including Thomas. who died at age 21 in 1819. His sandstone marker includes a passage from the New Testament and the only known reference on our Westchester County Cemetery monument to servant, a euphemism for slave. For point 12, walk east, probably 40 yards, to the next small American flag. During the Revolutionary War, the British hired auxiliary troops from the German state of Hesse-Kassel to assist with the fight against the Americans. Hesse was a small landlocked principality whose army, modeled on the Prussian army, was a valuable source of revenue and would be available to a friendly power like England. The Hessians accounted for some of the 4,000-man British force that engaged the Americans at the Battle of Pell's Point, about a mile from here, on October 18, 1776. After the battle, the Hessians occupied St. Paul's Church for use as a hospital, and some of the young privates who died of illness were buried here in a pit that had been used to compose mortar for the construction of the church. For the last point, number 13, pivot from the Hessian grave toward the rear and walk perhaps 10 yards. During the Revolutionary War, New York City was the headquarters of the British operation to subdue the rebellion. St. Paul's was just north of English defense perimeters and south of strong American troop placements in Upper Westchester. These conditions created a no man's land, or a neutral ground, characterized by many small battles, no governmental authority, and residents subjected to frequent raids by both armies, causing many people to evacuate to safer regions. In one such attack on March 16, 1777, the British surprised an American foraging party stationed at the nearby home of Patriot leader Stephen Ward. Several American militiamen were killed, and they were buried near the road. Skeletons were removed to this grave in the early 20th century. Thanks for coming by, and please ask staff in the Visitor Center if you had any trouble locating the points of interest on the tour.